But they can't be generically strong. Because if they're generically strong, then you can find them in every single deck. And what people do is they find a way to squeeze in one or two into every deck that they build. And now they're always shored up against that matchup. But they're still dependent on drawing that card. And so it becomes kind of this feedback loop of how well do I know the matchup? Did I make sure to include that silver bullet card in my deck? Can I make sure to find it? And there's no way, especially on the ladder, that you're not going to feel targeted. No one comes out of that feeling good. The guy doesn't think, oh man, I made a really great decision including Hollow Grovekeeper whenever 20% of the meta is Lionar. He doesn't think that. Not if he's a real competitive player. He just thinks, oh, well, I got lucky and I happened to find the one of Hollow Grovekeeper that I put in my deck. Good times. But he doesn't think he made a skillful play. He was riding the rails. The card was there and designed for him to do specifically that purpose. There was no decision making involved. He went and cycled to find the card, and then he played it at the appropriate moment. The entire thing was spelled out for him. No decision tree at all. There was an Ironcliff Guardian. I shot it with Hollow Grovekeeper. The end. There's no skill. No skill at all. I do approve of silver bullet cards that are extremely weak in terms of their general usefulness, but very good in a specific matchup because they'll find their way into the sideboard of decks. That's what the design of them for is in Magic, or that's what the design of them is for in Magic the Gathering. Is so that you find them in the decks whenever you're going into a tournament, you find space for them in your sideboard, and you bring them in at the appropriate time, and your planning contributed to your success. If they can find their way into every deck, because they're, not bad. Is Ironcliff really a good target for Hollow Grovekeeper? Yeah, probably. If they can find your way into the deck and be, not bad in every single matchup, then it doesn't require any decision-making process to include them and go seek them out in the appropriate matchup. Okay. This also has the added effect of whenever we have too many silver bullet cards that target a specific archetype, that now that archetype is balanced around the idea that it has a bunch of targeted hate. You have to give it more powerful cards to make it viable in the meta, because all of its direct counter is unavailable. Why did we have to print? I'm saying we, like I'm part of the design team. I'm not. I'm not part of the design team or part of the planning team. Honestly, I'm just hoping those guys talk to me anymore, like that we're still on friendly terms after we finish this. That's all I can really hope. And I guess I really can't blame them if they don't. But anyways, you have these silver bullet cards. And what happens? Why did so many powerful control type effect cards have to be put into the game artificially? And why was it okay to make so many of them so strong? Because the type of control that is played in Duelyst is weak to aggro. It was difficult for them to gain control during the mid-game and redevelop. If you had put those control cards into the metagame from post-Sunsteel nerf, it would have been unfairly dominant how good they were. And you're forced into pigeonholing those design decisions because of how strong the thing that is opposed to your strategy is. It's sort of a creeping effect. They call it power creep sometime in other games, where things just get better over time. And so you're forced to design better and better cards. And that's part of the concern of silver bullets, is it feeds back into itself. Too many silver bullets. Now I have to give a specific archetype way too powerful cards. Better make it another silver bullet to balance that out. That's going to always result in problems. Okay. Last one I think I want to talk about for reducing the skill in Duelyst. Cards that reduce the opportunity cost of playing your best spells. And so I kind of bumped into this earlier whenever I talked about ranged removal. Okay, how you could be more selective with your positioning on your big bomb cards because you have cheap removal, and that allows you to solve one minor problem with a card that's really designed to solve major problems. So, for example, Tempest is really not meant to be a removal spell for one creature or to really kill the opponent. It might double to kill the opponent later, because just killing the opponent is always the best decision. But it's not what it's meant for. It's not really meant to push damage. It's supposed to be a downside card. So if I'm going up against Swarm and I have a Blood Tear Alchemist and a Tempest in hand, I really want to time that Tempest to have maximum impact. I don't want to use it to just clear a single creature, right? But because I have so much access to the same kind of effect, it's not a big deal for me to pull the trigger early. It doesn't matter. I am extremely likely to draw another card that will do the same thing, and so I will not get punished for my decision to use my board clearing effect as a single removal effect. So whenever I've got access to too many things that do essentially the same thing, I don't have to make as careful a decision-making process. Also, going back to fast mana, when I have access to fast mana, my opponent wasn't even aware that they needed to play around it. And so now I can use things that were meant to be used in the mid and late game, in the early game, and still not get punished for it. And one of the reasons I can get away with using cards like Tempest, Holy Immolation, Mecantor, as removal plus damage in the early game is because of how much access to damage I have overall. So if you can kind of see what I'm trying to get at, I'm trying to get at how all of these play into one another, and you get this culminating effect that while positioning in Duelyst is still very important, we have reduced it from the eye in the sky, this is probably how you're going to win or lose this match, with a little bit of factor of what lines of play you selected and what you drew. I mean, there's always a little bit of RNG in there, and that's fine. It keeps the game fresh. We talked about that in the article. And so you can't be doing things that way. It's going to always end up poorly. Now, the big concern is at the top level, and you know, for the casual guys, they're still discovering wonderful things about how important the decision making and how important the positioning is in Duelyst. It's really these extremely complex tit for tat decisions that you're doing, or positioning decisions that you make, that have become no-brainers for everyone who's playing the game at the top end. I would say that right now, the players that I play consistently, the top 50 guys, not one of us could be said to be better at positioning than the others. Because we've all hit a ceiling. We've all bumped into the ceiling where the decisions that we have access to are homogenized. And the reason for it is because decisions like daisy chaining a creature down away from it so that you have to separate it between two spaces so that they can't hit you with a broad effect, or so that if they want to try to use some kind of wrath effect, it'll be difficult to get enough damage to kill the one creature that's by itself. decisions like that have become less difficult because of the cards that have been added to the game. And so it's not even really a decision-making process at all anymore, because if I'm wrong about the guessing game of what does my opponent have access to right now, and he has the point removal plus tempo play, I'm completely out of the game. And if I'm right that he is forced to playing his Mecantor into this creature and killing it and not hitting me, he doesn't get punished as much, even though I made a fantastic decision at getting a card out of his hand. And that's the problem there. I don't believe that we're anywhere close to what I'm going to describe as a game where a player plays one or two moves and then they know all the outcomes based on the 2 or 3 moves that both players played, and then there's a concession. But that is the fear, is that eventually we start finding ourselves in unwinnable positions, that we've played the matchup so many times we just know there's nothing we can do based on what we have in hand and what we've seen. And so that's really, you know, there was a guy on the forums who said, I made the comment, I'm worried that we're getting to a state where the best play is so obvious to both of the skilled players that we're just trading bombs back and forth, you know? And I think that the Lionar Mecantor, or the Lionar Magmar matchup really highlights that. We're just trading bombs back and forth until one of us runs out. And that's not a skill anymore. If the best play is obvious to both players, then it wasn't a difficult enough decision to call anyone skilled for making it. And when you get to that kind of state, skill's out the window. It becomes if everyone can identify all the best plays for both players, they're not making decisions anymore. There was only one decision, and they're just riding the rails until the game's over. And that's not skill. That's luck of whatever you happen to have drawn. You're just hoping to get more lucky than the other guy. I'm not trying to push for a metagame like the Mask of Shadows meta, where there was one deck, and that was it. And if you were the best at playing that deck, then you won all of your games, because it wasn't very fun. I mean, yeah, it feels like fun a lot when you first start playing it, because you're like, oh yeah, this is great. You know, I win almost all of my games, and good times for me, which is awesome. But people don't learn anything on decks that are that consistent. They're not forced into difficult decisions, whether they're the skilled or unskilled player in the matchup. They're not forced into difficult decisions back and forth. They never develop or grow as a player. They have learned the winning path to, or they've learned the path to victory. They've learned the path to victory, and then they're just repeating it. They're not getting any more skilled at the game in that meta. And the guy who's losing is just trying to figure out what he did wrong, and he's varying his plays, and he's trying to find a combination that never really stuck out to him in the first place. It's extremely difficult to separate, did I get lucky or unlucky in that matchup, from did that player play better than me? Whenever you're both playing the mirror match and you still pick up games, because true mirrors are pretty close to 50-50. They should be. And so it's very difficult for the losing player, whether he lost from skill or whether he lost because he got a little unlucky. It's hard for him to sort that out. He will learn much more when he wins a game and can identify, I won because I top decked here. Every time I have played against somebody else, they didn't have to top deck, so I must not be playing as efficiently as them. When they can truly be honest with themselves about the outcome of the match, that's when they learn the most. So